These are some of my favorite books for creative people. In this video, I'm going to show you why they're important, tell you what they're about, and share some of the most valuable takeaways I personally had from reading them. Book 1, The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. One of the biggest challenges when it comes to creativity is that internal resistance we can all feel. We're not 100% sure where to start, or we don't know what to do, or we don't think it'll be good enough. Those feelings of internal resistance can keep us from ever actually creating anything because we just don't start. I spent like 7 years wanting to make YouTube videos before I ever uploaded a video, for example. If that sounds like you, then you absolutely need this book. Links for all the books will be in the description, by the way. This is a book about resistance, specifically the internal resistance we feel towards creativity that keeps us from doing the work, the things that are inside of us that we want to express but don't. This book addresses why that is and what is holding us back. The book is broken into 3 major sections. The first focuses on understanding resistance and seeing where it's active in our lives. The second section is how we can take steps through our day-to-day routines and habits to overcome that resistance. And the third section dives into Pressfield's personal philosophy of creativity, kind of a method by which we as individuals can, through the act of creation, unfold into a truer version of ourselves. The biggest takeaway for me is the idea that resistance grows in proportion to the importance of a particular task. In other words, we feel the most resistance when we really should do something. And I think that in general this has implications far beyond just creativity and into the way we should all try to live our lives. The more we resist something, the more crucial it is to our own growth. The more it points to an area of ourselves that we are afraid to express. So for me, the biggest takeaway was that in art and in life, you can use the things you are resisting the most as a compass that will always point you towards the areas you are weakest in, the areas that you need to improve and grow in to be a more complete version of yourself. It shows you what you must do in order to grow. This is a fun book, it's easy to read, it's well written, and it rang true to me in a lot of different areas. One of the things that spoke to me was the idea that you have to show up for your creativity before you can expect your creativity to show up for you. In other words, don't necessarily wait for that lightning strike of motivation before you commit to doing the work. Commit to doing the work of creativity, and then the lightning will also strike. So many people, myself included, have this tendency to kind of sit around thinking and envisioning like we want to create something so good, but we don't know where to start, so we overthink and we overanalyze and we go through the process of envisioning this ideal thing, but we're not sure how to do it, and in doing so, that mental battle keeps us from ever actually starting. And so this next book is about starting, pretty much no matter what, jumping headfirst into that resistance, getting your hands dirty, and learning through the process of doing. It doesn't matter if you failed or get rejected or if your work just kind of sucks right now, it's more important that you are doing it. And that is one of the views expressed in this book, Blue Fishing by Steve Sims. This is a really fun read full of unique ideas about authenticity and connection. The author made his name as the founder of this luxury concierge service. If you want a private dinner at the foot of Michelangelo's statue of David in Florence, Italy, while being serenaded by Andrea Bocelli, this guy can hook that up for you. That's something he actually did, by the way. This is a book about authenticity, about connection, about people and business. It's about overcoming your limits and pushing yourself to do things that you didn't even think were possible. And above all else, it's a book about getting things done. For the creatives out there, especially those trying to do freelance work or start their own brand, this book has some amazing ideas on how to interact with clients, maintain relationships, forge business deals. There are sections on the importance of embracing failure as a learning opportunity, about how to move quickly and test new ideas instead of being paralyzed by analysis. And to be fair, these are things that get talked about in a lot of books, but I think Steve Sims has a pretty unique take on it. He kind of cuts back the veneer of like fake corporate professionalism, and he has some amazing ideas on how to connect with other people by just genuinely caring about them and incorporating that into a business model. For me personally, that has definitely been the biggest takeaway. Looking at the world of business as a more creative oriented person has always been a little bit terrifying. It feels kind of nebulous, and just take a step back and remember that you're not necessarily always dealing with this faceless entity of a corporation, but instead interacting with other actual humans who you have an opportunity to connect with in a unique way that can be mutually beneficial. It's so easy in our modern world full of emails and text and digital interfaces to forget that, like, oh yeah, there's a person on the other side of that screen, and that is an opportunity for you to connect with somebody and forge a real relationship, not only in work but also in life. I think that's such an important thing to remember, and yet it's so easy to forget, and this book is really helpful with great ideas on how to maintain things like that. Just a couple of the connectivity kind of hacks that Steve Sims brings forward in this book are things like writing handwritten notes to people. They will be way more interested in opening them because nobody gets handwritten notes anymore, and it's much harder to throw something like that away than it is to delete an email. Or instead of sending somebody a text or an email, you can send them a video memo, record yourself, make it personalized, and in doing that, we have these opportunities on a small scale to connect with people on a deeper emotional level than they are used to, and stand above the crowd of communication that we have on the daily basis that just feels so normal and boring. It's a huge and really easy way for us to kind of break out and stand above everybody else as somebody with a unique take, somebody who's doing something different. This is definitely a book about walking the walk. It's not about how to make yourself look good, but it's about how to make the people you are interacting with feel good. So much of the time in life when we are interacting with people, either in business or in art or creativity, we can have a tendency to constantly be thinking about our own next move, right? We are trying to figure out how to respond to what they're saying, how to react to the situation, what we should do next. And in doing that, we fail to actually listen and consider their perspective, their point of view, and what they are actually saying. And maybe in doing that, we cut ourselves short. We can lose an advantage we have to maybe actually connect with them or understand them on a deeper level that could change the dynamic of the conversation. And so by practicing a couple of the things in this book, like listening and empathy, for example, we can genuinely begin to understand situations in business and in life on a new level. And that also brings us to our next book, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Now, to be fair, this one is a little bit of an oddball in a video about creativity, but stick with me, it'll all make sense. One of the biggest challenges that I have always personally felt about my creativity is the sort of dealing side. If you want to make money, you want to sell your work, you want to work or collaborate with other people, there is a certain element of having to talk about price, figuring out what you're worth, getting what you're worth, standing up for your work as well as being the person who creates it, that can feel very uncomfortable, especially if as a creative person you might be a little bit more on the sensitive artsy side, right? And so for the creative people out there who feel kind of similar to that, this is an excellent book to add to your repertoire. This is a book all about negotiation. If Blue Fishing is the book about how to connect with people and make sure that you get to a win-win resolution, Never Split the Difference thinks, that's great, but really you winning is the most important thing. The author, Chris Voss, operated as an FBI hostage negotiator for over 20 years, and between 2003 and 2007 was the FBI's lead international hostage negotiator. This book teaches us how to listen in a brand new way, how we can mirror people in order to build a rapport, how we can ask what the author calls calibrated questions, which are essentially open-ended questions that can very quickly shift the power dynamic in a conversation. It's kind of crazy how well they work actually, and how to haggle and bargain over price, which is just a very good skill to have in day-to-day life. Like, you ever try to buy a car? That's kind of important. For me, the biggest takeaway from this book is that I think everybody should probably just learn more about negotiation. It's something that is so common in life, whether it's buying a new car, trying to sell our artwork, getting funding for a startup, or just like trying to figure out where to go to dinner. And this book teaches you so many tips and tricks that are incredibly useful. Just as an example, using those so-called calibrated questions, which are essentially open-ended what or how questions, like, well, how am I supposed to do that? Or how would you like me to proceed? Has a really subtle twist to a power dynamic that I found useful. I used to work as a waiter in a restaurant, and a couple of times food comes out wrong and people just get upset, and you find yourself as a waiter offering solutions like, well, I could do this, well, I could do this, well, I could do this, and people will shut you down. They'll say no, no, no. They don't necessarily offer any of their own suggestions, but calibrated question. How would you like me to proceed? What can I do for you? How can we fix this? Situations like that flip the dynamic because they make it the other person's responsibility to come up with a solution to their own problem, and if you can give that to them, then they will have no reason to not be satisfied because they told you that's what they wanted. I think this book can absolutely help us become more well-rounded individuals and learn to kind of stand our own ground and get what we're worth and make sure we are not shorting ourselves. And that has the potential to offer such a tremendous amount of financial but also confidence value to our day-to-day lives. Our fourth book is also designed to help you deal with those challenging moments, but also just basically every moment in your life, and that is your own personal journal. Here's the thing, right? If you are a creative person, chances are you've got a lot of ideas, you've got a lot of thoughts, you've got a lot of potentially projects going on, things you might want to try, things you're not sure about. It's really easy to lose track of your own thoughts or feel overwhelmed when you've got all of that stuff going on, right? In my own life, I have found tremendous value in simply writing stuff down. I've journaled quite a lot over the last just about a year. These are all full. I think it's kind of a generally holistic experience. It just feels kind of healing in a way, but also tremendously practical, like so useful in a lot of ways. Organize your thoughts, keep track of information, just keep track of like tasks you need to do. We are so used to storing everything digitally, but when you physically write something down, there's something, it makes it feel more real. And in writing down your ideas by hand, you have to actually take a little bit of time, right, to write them down. That makes you consider them more thoroughly than if you had just typed them down really quickly. And not only does having a journal help you organize your own thought process, but also it allows you to go back and dive back into where you were maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, and see how far you've come, which can feel very inspiring in a way. We have a tendency to overlook all the small changes we made and feel like, oh, nothing's changed. And then if you are able to physically look, be like, wow, I did a lot of stuff. Or you might find that, damn it, I really didn't do very much. In which case, you know now, going back to the war of art, that you've got some resistance that you really need to punch through and you need to change something up in your day-to-day life. But without those self-audits that a journal provides, it's hard for us to reflect accurately on ourselves. Writing all of our thoughts down allows us this third-person perspective where we can kind of have this overview and detach a little bit from our own concepts. For me, I have found that really useful. I would strongly consider, if you are the kind of person who has a lot of ideas, a lot of creative thoughts, just things you want to do or create, try writing some of it down. It's like long division, you know, you can maybe technically do it in your head, but it's going to be a lot more challenging and confusing and frustrating than writing things down on paper and just working them out. Journaling can be very helpful in creative work when it comes to cutting down that kind of nebulous, infinite possibility of ideas to at least have a place to start. And our next book is also about where to start and actually what to do next. Mastery by Robert Greene, a book about the path from beginner to, well, you know, master. I do not have a physical copy of this book. I listened to it on Audible, which is our sponsor for this video. Just kidding, not sponsored by Audible. You know, maybe someday though, right? In Mastery, Robert Greene systematically analyzes the lives of so-called masters, people who had innovative approaches or unique ideas, people like Albert Einstein or Leonardo da Vinci or Marie Curie. He dives deep into the lives of both historical and modern masters and analyzes the paths they took on their personal route to mastery. In fact, if I have a critique of this book, it's that he almost does this too much. There's a lot of information about historical masters in this book, which is great, but it's just a little dense. Greene argues that becoming a master of a craft or art or science is not so much talent as people tend to assume, or necessarily even luck. Greene contends that most masters accumulated their skill and ability by pursuing something that was uniquely true to them. Leonardo da Vinci famously was fascinated by detail as a child, loved understanding how things worked. Albert Einstein was obsessed with magnetic force as a child. Mastery teaches us how to go over our own childhoods and look at our own upbringings and find those things dormant within ourselves that might have once drawn us as children, fascinated us, or captivated us. He advocates we look back into ourselves and understand that fundamental thing that drives us. This book breaks the process of attaining mastery into 3 steps. Firstly, the apprenticeship, where you learn and absorb as much possible information, maybe take on a mentorship or more than one if you can. Second step being the so-called creative active phase, where you begin to utilize your skills, build a name for yourself, start practicing the things you've been learning. The third step is mastery, where people reach the point where they have accumulated so much knowledge, so much information, they have so many hours of hard work practice that they begin to freely associate new ideas and concepts in their mind that other people don't think of. They have integrated their craft so deeply within themselves that it becomes something that is almost automatic within them. It is a part of them. This is when people say they feel like their paintbrush is part of their body, or they feel like their instrument is an extension of their selves. For me, my favorite takeaway from this book is what Robert Greene calls your life's task. The idea that we do maybe have deep within ourselves that spark of interest, those things that fascinate us, that we feel drawn to, and feeding that might just allow us to unfold ourselves into a more complete and realized version of the person we really are deep inside. I think there's some merit to that idea. I think, maybe you could become a little too obsessive, but I think that in general, there is a lot of truth to that we might have something within ourselves that we want deeply to express, but we suppress it because we're afraid we don't know what other people will think, we don't know how to do it, we feel a lot of what the war of art would call resistance, keeping us from moving forward, and we allow that to shove us into a shell where then we live out an unhappy and unfulfilled life. And I think as a creative person, having that as a guiding light, trusting that internal intuition a little bit, there's a lot of merit to that. Creativity, especially when it involves pushing through that internal resistance and expressing something fundamentally true about yourself, I think that is, in a sense, a way of being that is more pure. And that is one of the points of our next book. The Creative Act is a beautiful, simple, almost minimalistic work by legendary music producer Rick Rubin. Reading this book somehow just feels peaceful to me. It's full of inspiring wisdom and advice and philosophy from Rubin's 30-something, 40-something, a long time working as a music producer. Despite working with celebrities for the last 4 decades, it is not a who's who, and talking about all these fancy people has none of that at all. It is simply Rubin's personal creative philosophy, talking about things like why it's important to cultivate a certain level of detachment from your work so you can see it objectively, why it's important to remain as open as possible to new ideas and inspiration and not have preconceptions that keep you from creating good work because you think a certain thing will be bad, you don't try it. He advocates for trying just about everything and then letting the work speak for itself. And that is my favorite takeaway from this book, the importance of remaining open as a creator and not locking yourself down to how you think certain things have to be, or the way it's always been, or the things you've always done. It's so easy to lock yourself in this little mental box that only exists in your own head, but really those limitations are almost always just self-applied resistance, going back to what Stephen Pressfield talks about. And so the more we can remain open, the more we can try new things and experiment and take so much pressure off ourselves with a certain level of detachment. It is something we created, now we're going to create something new, then we're going to create something else. Not viewing every single thing we create as this end result that has to be perfect or everything's ruined frees us up to try so many new things and allows the work to speak for itself instead of us feeling the need to safeguard it and protect it and keep it fragile and oh, nobody can touch it, which in doing so frequently we strangle our own work. Take a little bit of pressure off yourself when it comes to creating new things. Realize that, probably not the end of the world if I fuck it up. And honestly, I think that it's not just in art that we can cultivate that level of openness and slight detachment from everything we do having to be perfect and benefit tremendously. So often in life we close ourselves off just like we do with our creative options, and the more we approach situations with those preconceptions and ideas, we block ourselves from trying anything new, things that might be better than things we've ever experienced, both in creativity and in life in general. Giving yourself a little bit of distance from everything being so personal is tremendously valuable. Our final book is just a little bit of a change-up. It is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. This is a work of fiction. It is the only one on the list, and it follows Santiago, who is a Spanish shepherd boy who sets off on an epic journey to find a treasure that he saw in his dreams. Now, this book does have a certain, like, new age spiritual dent to it, and if you are not into that, you'll probably hate this book, so fair warning. But in the spirit of remaining open to new ideas and new concepts, I think that there is a lot of value to be found in a simple story about somebody following the signs they see as leading themselves towards their dreams. The story follows Santiago as he travels across the Mediterranean Sea to Egypt, pursuing his so-called personal legend, his destiny of sorts, and the struggles and obstacles he overcomes and how he has to grow into a more actualized full version of himself in order to reach his destination. As creative people, we all have things that we want to express, sometimes that we need to express, and it doesn't always make sense to other people, and often it might not even make sense to us. But that doesn't change our fundamental need to bring it into the world. My favorite takeaway from The Alchemist is the importance of listening to your own intuition and following your heart and finding your own path through life, something that feels true to you. Not the small, scared, resistance-bound part of you, but that deeper drive we all have to create, connect, and be authentic that we so often suppress or try not to listen to because we're afraid or it's just inconvenient. For me, The Alchemist is a call for us all to listen to that inner voice that encourages us to grow and push our boundaries and become that version that we know deep inside we all know exists. There are no guarantees in life. There's no way to be sure that the things we do or the things we create will have the impact we want them to. We can't guarantee success or fame or fortune, but what we can do is decide to do the things in life that feel truest to who we are. We can decide to share what's inside of ourselves. We can decide to create, to push through resistance and feed that deeper part of us that wants to grow and become something greater and express itself in a way that is true to who we are. We can find genuine ways to authentically connect with people and forge new relationships that we might not have thought were possible before if we're just willing to be open to the ideas. We can learn how to stand up for ourselves in negotiations and dealings around money and the business side of creativity. We can make sure that we can stand our own and not get taken advantage of. We can organize our thoughts and ideas and creations by journaling, by taking some time to write down our own thought processes in a tangible way and track our progress to see how far we've come and make sure that we stay on track to audit our own lives. We can walk that path of mastery by feeding that internal drive within us, that thing that we think is so cool, that makes us light up, by letting that guide our life instead of what everybody else thinks or wants us to do. We can live a creative life by remaining as open as possible and trying not to cut ourselves off by preconceptions and box ourselves into small little areas where we feel trapped, by freeing ourselves to see how things actually work instead of judging them before trying them. And we can do our best to follow our own dreams and allow our intuition to guide us and create and be what feels authentically true to that deeper part of who we are. If any of these books sound interesting to you, I strongly recommend them. Links will be in the description, and I will end by saying this. Each of these books can offer a tremendous amount of value to your creative life and just your life in general, but I will say one thing. Going back to The War of Art, the very first book we talked about, if you are using reading a bunch of books as a form of resistance to say, you know what, I just need to prepare a little bit more, I just need to learn a little bit more, then I'll be ready to start, then I'll create, I just need to read something, then I'll create. No. You can buy the book, sure, but go out and create something right now. Push through the resistance, because the book will just be used as another tool to keep you from fucking doing the thing that you know you need to do and you're afraid. So what I beg of you, just start. It doesn't have to be perfect. Remember that detachment. It doesn't have to be great. It doesn't even have to be good, but you have to take the first step. If you're still not convinced, you should check out this video where I talk about how self-improvement can sometimes be procrastination in disguise and end up wasting our valuable time. But if you already believe that, then what you should do is go make something right now. Please do that. That would make me very happy. Thank you so much for watching the video. We'll see you next time. Bye.